Good afternoon. My name is Paul Hazelwood. This is Communications 101. This is the second speech, which is known as the process speech. My audience tonight is my granddaughter Alexa, holding Tess or Melby? Tess. And then it's my granddaughter Carly, my daughter Laura, holding Melby, and my wife Jenny. And then behind the camera is my son-in-law Todd. Okay, well, let's imagine it's a busy evening at home and you're going to make French fried potatoes. And you've got the fresh cut potatoes by the stove. You've got a pan or frying pan half full of hot oil. And you're getting ready to cook supper and you're kind of in a hurry. So the oil gets nice and hot. You grab a large handful of French fries, maybe just a little too large, drop them into the grease, and all of a sudden it boils over. And instantly the grease and the stove erupt into flames. What would you do? Well, if this happens to you, knowing what you would do and could save lives and property. And so this speech is to inform you on the proper use of a fire extinguisher. And it's really easy to use a fire extinguisher if you just remember the acronym PASS. Now, I've been an industrial fire brigade member for many years, over 20 years where I worked, and I fought many fires, small and large. Our job as the fire brigade was to extinguish small fires and to minimize the spread of large fires until the fire department arrived on the scene. Now, the incident I just described with the kitchen actually happened to me. And believe me, by the time it was over with, even though I had fought fires at work, trying to put out a fire in my own house, I was very shaky by the time it was all said and done. But I was fortunate I had the tools and the knowledge to successfully put out that fire. And I will be using the PASS acronym today to describe the 4 steps that you use to use a fire extinguisher. And first I will describe the letter P, which stands for pull, and then A for aim, S for squeeze, and then the last S for sweep. But before we start that, I'd like to do a little background information about fire and fire extinguishers. Fire, there are 3 things that are necessary for you to have a fire. 3 things must be present and in the sufficient, in sufficient quantities for a fire to occur. First, there must be oxygen. Well, for all of us people that breathe air, and that's most of the creatures on the earth, fortunately, there's 21% oxygen in the atmosphere. Unfortunately, that's more than enough to sustain any fire. Secondly, there has to be a fuel, some kind of combustible material to, fuel the fire. And there are a lot of combustibles. Almost all items are combustibles. Paper, wood, plastic, gas, and cooking oil are some good examples. And then lastly, there must be heat. There must be enough heat to push the fuel up to its ignition temperature. And the typical ignition temperatures of wood and paper are around 400 to 500 degrees. The temperature of oil is actually 200 to 300 degrees, so it's much easier to catch on fire. And so you have to have all 3 of these components, and when they are all present in the correct quantities, a chemical reaction starts to occur, and that is called fire. That is what happens when these 3 are present. So, when they are all present, you have the sufficient conditions to start a fire. So next we want to talk a little bit about the fire extinguisher itself. This is a dry chemical fire extinguisher. There are many types of them out there, but I'm just going to talk about this one tonight. And basically, this is an ABC fire extinguisher. Clearly on the label it says ABC. This could be used on ordinary combustibles, flammable liquids, and electrical fires. So, and so it is clearly labeled. And also in addition, there are pictograms which indicate what type of materials it can be used on. There's a picture of a trash can, picture of oil or gas burning, and a picture of electrical cord. Now there is also many other types. If it just was a letter A or type A fire extinguisher, it may just have a letter A and only the first pictograms showing ordinary combustibles. It may have all 3 pictograms, but the other 2 would have lines through them. Now the way the fire extinguisher works, it's filled with a fine yellow powder and is pressurized with nitrogen to push out the powder when it's opened up and ready to discharge. Now, the way that this puts out the fire is that yellow powder coats the fuel. It coats the fuel with the yellow powder, separating it from the oxygen, so the fuel no longer has oxygen. So if it doesn't have oxygen, You've taken away this side of the triangle, the chemical reaction doesn't occur, so the fire goes out. So by removing the oxygen, the chemical reaction stops, the fire goes out. So next, let's talk about the PASS method, or the PASS acronym. Now, we've got a little history on fires, and you have a better understanding of how fires start and how the fire extinguisher works. So the first letter in the acronym PASS is P. P stands for pull, and in this case, it's pull the pin. When you pull the pin, it allows the extinguisher to be activated and discharge the powder onto the fuel source. The next step is aim. Aim at the base of the fire. So once we pull the pin, we'll want to aim the fire, or aim the extinguisher at the fuel at the base of the fire. The next step, the third letter in P is S, and PASS is S, and that stands for squeeze. We've removed the pin, we've aimed it, now we're ready to squeeze the handle, and when we squeeze the handle, that fine yellow powder will exit out of this and onto top of the fuel, coating it and isolating it from the oxygen source, which will extinguish the fire. Now, when you aim, then the next step is the last letter of PASS, which is S for squeeze. And when you now squeeze the handle, that powder will come out, coat the fuel, and put out the fire. Now, when you do this, you want to make sure that you're 8 to 10 feet from the fire, and you want to sweep this back and forth, as that will help cover that fuel with the powder, isolating it from the oxygen. Now, what you have to remember is you only have 10 to 15 seconds. That's all this fire extinguisher will last. So we use 10 to 15 seconds. And remember, don't let the fire get between you and a safe exit. As you can see in this particular case, I'm 8 to 10 feet from the fire. I have an exit behind my back and the fire in front of me. And so that's the position you want to take. Because of the fire spreading quickly from the initial source, or it's involving the cabinets or the ceiling or the walls, your best method would be to exit immediately and don't attempt to put out the fire. Size is very important. This is a small extinguisher. It's only good for small fires that have just started. If it's already engulfed the cabinets and the walls, exit the building immediately. So just some safety tips. Remember the sizes are very important. Don't fight a fire if it's too big. Also, make sure you keep your exit behind you. Keep the fire in front of you. So, in summary then, I did want to say, if this ever happens to you, if you're ever in a situation where you experience a fire at home, at school, or at work, remember to be safe first. Keep your exit clear. Then use the PASS acronym to use the fire extinguisher. And I hope this never happens to you, but if it does, remember to use the tools and the knowledge you've gained tonight. Have a fire extinguisher in your home. Know where the fire extinguishers at your work and your school are located, and use the knowledge you've gained tonight to help end that emergency situation. Thank you.